I give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Dartmouth Imperial Oil Refinery has grown continuously since it started operations in 1918 to meet the demands of the First World War and is currently investing $150 million in production and infrastructure upgrades. And whereas the refinery is a leader in industrial safety performance with more than 5.5 million hours worked without serious injury. And whereas the refinery's 200 employees and 70 contracted staff exemplify a high level of professionalism and work ethic. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulate Imperial Oil and Esso as they celebrate their 125 years of service in Canada and thank them for their generous support to community organizations and initiatives within the Halifax Regional Municipality, as well as their economic contribution to Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the morning of December the 6th, 1917 is remembered each year in Nova Scotia and beyond for a day filled with destruction and loss. And whereas Nova Scotians, particularly those in Halifax area, set aside time each year to remember the Halifax explosion, the victims, their families, and the friends, as well as those who came to aid. And whereas the education of generations to come is assisted by many organizations, museums, and individuals so that the memory of this horrendous disaster is not forgotten. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly take time to remember the victims of the Halifax explosion and continue to educate our children about the loss and display of courage. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Ironworker, a monument to recognize the building of the Angus L. MacDonald Bridge, was unveiled on Monday, December 5th, 2005. Whereas Cyril Sampson of Timberlea worked on this bridge linking Halifax and Dartmouth. Whereas Mr. Sampson worked on other bridges in Chatham, New Brunswick, Seal Island, Cape Breton, and various buildings in the Halifax area. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Cyril Sampson and all workers on their recognition of their contribution to the building of the Angus L. MacDonald Bridge. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Question waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 84 years ago, the Nova Scotia Home for Coloured Children opened its doors for orphan children and is currently the oldest co-ed residential facility in Nova Scotia, providing residential care for youth in need. Whereas on Sunday, December the 11th, the 74th annual telethon for the Nova Scotia Home for Coloured Children will be broadcast on Eastlink Television to provide much-needed funds for this remarkable organization. Whereas the annual fundraiser broadcast began in 1931, making it the oldest, longest-running fundraising campaign in Canada. Therefore, it be resolved that members of this House recognize the important work of the volunteer staff and board of the Nova Scotia Home for Coloured Children and wish them every success in this year's telethon. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Question waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, before I begin my resolution, I'm wondering if the House will permit me an introduction.
Yes, most certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the West Gallery, there is a constituent of Dartmouth North as well as a Dartmouth High student, a grade 10 high school student by the name of Brandon Walker. Brandon Walker has been a student ambassador for the Kids Help phone line, and he is here today participating with me as a job shadowing person. And Mr. Speaker, I want you to know that Brandon has already recognized how much work an MLA must do, beginning his services at early at around about 8:30 this morning. So I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I would greatly appreciate the House if they would give Brandon would stand and receive a warm welcome of the House.
Certainly welcome our guest to gallery today, the honourable member for Dartmouth North on this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mr. Carl Nightingale of Dartmouth has been a well-known leader and volunteer in our community since the 1990s, and whereas Mr. Nightingale has used his skills, talent, and passion to support and enrich many grassroots service organizations, including the Dartmouth Family Centre, the Dartmouth North Echo newspaper, Knowledge is Power, and the Dartmouth Boys and Girls Club. And whereas Mr. Nightingale is concluding his work with the Dartmouth Community Health Board to pursue a new but equally meaningful career opportunity. Therefore be it resolved that all members of the Legislative House applaud the efforts of Carl Nightingale, one of the many outstanding community leaders that make Dartmouth a safe and vibrant community and a wonderful place to live. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the ESO Women's National Hockey Championship is celebrating its 25th anniversary by holding its tournament once again in Sydney, Nova Scotia, and whereas chair people and the coordinating committee have worked tirelessly preparing everything from travel of players to the freezing of pucks, and whereas the championship will see many Olympic caliber players fresh from the Winter Games in Italy, therefore be resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly congratulate the coordinating committee and the many volunteers for their exceptional planning and wish them the best of luck as they once again prove to the world that Nova Scotia is the place for major sporting events. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice, please.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Soil and Water Conservation Society of Metro Halifax is a non-profit organization of professionals dedicated to protecting land and water resources in Nova Scotia. And whereas the Society has developed extensive data, modeling, analysis, and scientific reports, which it shares with environmental groups, universities, consultants, and various levels of government. And whereas the Society raises public awareness and action through watershed and construction monitoring, educational television shows, website, public presentations, and lake cleanups. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly thank and congratulate the Soil and Water Conservation Society of Metro Halifax under the extraordinary leadership of Shalom Mandeville, Chair and Scientific Director, for its many contributions to environmental protection in this province. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Middleton Lions Club is celebrating 60 years of serving the citizens of Middleton and surrounding communities, with support for such projects as the Middleton Rink Commission, Brownies and Guides, Soldiers Memorial Hospital, and the 12 Baskets Food Bank, and many more significant projects benefiting the community at large. And whereas the Middleton Lions Club is the oldest club in the province and has raised over $1 million during their 60 years of involvement to help those less fortunate, and whereas members of this great service club, both past and present, have a great deal to be proud of in their service of youth and the citizens of Middleton and surrounding communities, therefore be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly recognize the hard work and effort shown by the Middleton Lions Club members over the past 60 years and wish them continued success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question raised, is it agreed? Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on November 5th, 2005, the communities of Beachville, Lakeside, and Timberley retreated to the music from the You Are the Voice CD released by the Sacred Heart Church. And whereas this CD resulted from the hard work of Jennifer Quinn, Bob Quinn, Haywood Parrott, and Father Jim Richards. And whereas all who attended thoroughly enjoyed the music at the CD launch party in the Sacred Heart Church Hall. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the Sacred Heart Church Music Ministry on its release of the CD You Are the Voice and offer best wishes in its future endeavors. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 57 years ago the United Nations General Assembly recognized the equal and inalienable rights accorded to every human being by adopting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And whereas International Human Rights Day is marked every year with activities led by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, New York, and at the field presences. And whereas International Human Rights Day will be observed worldwide this Saturday, December 10th, therefore be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly observe International Human Rights Day and call all people and institutions in Nova Scotia to strive to promote respect for human rights. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Sambro Coast Guard Station was established in 1976 to serve the communities of Sambro, Terrence Bay, Prospect, and the coastline 140 nautical miles in each direction. And whereas the Sambro crews on Cutter 117 and now on the Sambro have carried out more than 2,500 search and rescue missions over the past 30 years and saved hundreds of lives. And whereas the old building has now been replaced with a new state-of-the-art station which will comfortably accommodate each four-man crew in its one-week tour of duty. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize the extremely valuable work of the Coast Guard Station Sambro and wish its crews well as they continue their watch along the coast from the new building. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution with due respect to the Minister. Whereas the Minister of Transportation has adopted my policy of calling for tenders in the fall. And whereas recently... Whereas recently as yesterday, the Minister called for a 10.9-kilometre paving contract in the Tory Minister of Justice Lunenburg County riding, and whereas Victoria the Lakes lost 7 kilometres of paving on Hunter's Mountain to the Inverness riding presently held by the Tory Minister of Tourism, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House petition the Minister of Transportation to continue to call for tenders for the coming year under the Campaign of Fairness which was touted in the last provincial election, and call tenders in all ridings, not only those held by Tory MLAs. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Question waiver. Here a no. I heard a no. The notice is table. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Megan Isles of Bear River, who is celebrating her 60th anniversary as a Canadian this year, arrived in Canada in 1945 as the war bride of Robert Arthur Isles. And whereas Mrs. Isles served in the British Land Army during World War II, and whereas during her 60 years in Canada, she has raised 4 children, served as a nurse's assistant at the Digby General Hospital, delivering babies and caring for mothers and babies, is a supporter of health and personal fitness programs, and has been involved in numerous community volunteer organizations and programs. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Mrs. Isles on her 80th birthday on November 21st and her 60 years as a Canadian, and recognize her dedication to her family, church, community, province, and country. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton and South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas John Jr. Hanna, a proud Cape Bretoner in Nova Scotia, was the first player in the NHL of Lebanese descent who played for the original six, and whereas Jr., like so many great Nova Scotians, lost a courageous battle with cancer on Sunday, November 19th, and whereas Jr.'s leadership and passion for being part of a team added to his outstanding personality and ability to make everyone feel special. Therefore, be it resolved, the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly send deepest condolences to the family and friends of John Jr. Hanna and remind them that at this difficult time that he is a person that will be missed but never forgotten. I would ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Royal Canadian Legion program, Call to Remembrance, instills in its junior high participants a knowledge and appreciation of Canada's participation in the First and Second World Wars, and whereas West Kings District High Grade 9 students won the Valley Region contest and will advance to the Legion's provincial competition, whereas its team members Ben Dush, Nathaniel Peters, Ian McKenzie, and Corey McBean excelled under coach Bill Reid. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House congratulate the West Kings team and their coach in this special Year of the Veteran and wish them the best of luck at the provincial Call to Remembrance competition. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the level of crime in our province has been a problem for some time now, and there has been an unusual number of cases of arson plaguing the Sydney area, and whereas there have been at least 100 fires that have been suspicious in nature in industrial Cape Breton this year, putting lives at risk and causing hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. Whereas the government is doing little to combat the problem of crime, which is not only an issue in Sydney and area, but obviously a province-wide concern. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly move to act now on the issue of crime in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver, is it agreed? Here a no. Notice is tabled. Orders of the day or questions put by members. Question period begin at 12:16 and end at 1:16. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And my question is going to be for the acting Minister of Economic Development. I'm not sure that. Can we take a? Oh.
He can't answer any questions.
Yeah.
It's going to add 2 minutes. Order, please. Question period will begin at 12:17 and end at 1:17. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question, again, is for the Acting Minister of Economic Development. Mr. Speaker, there are 150 families in Glace Bay who are wondering how they're going to make ends meet as a result of the closure of the Glace Bay fisheries on Mondays. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the day before yesterday, I visited that plant and I spoke with the owner, John Wilcox, about the impact that the closure would have on his employees and their families, and I can tell you absolutely that that is his major concern. Mr. Wilcox built this business from the ground up without a dollar of provincial or federal government assistance. When he bought the plant in 1992 from National Sea Products, it had 12 employees. On the day it closed, Mr. Speaker, it had 150 people who are now out of work as a result of that closure. So my question for the Acting Minister of Economic Development is, could he explain what his government is doing to provide access to capital so that Glace Bay Fisheries can sustain the plant and these jobs?
The Honourable the Acting Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can indicate to you that I've spoken to the Minister about the matter. The Department nor the Nova Scotia Business Inc. have received any request from the company. They are prepared to review those requests when received and to process those requests in the ordinary course of reviewing that application.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister has repeated what was said yesterday about this issue by Nova Scotia Business Inc. executives. In fact, they expressed surprise that they had not been approached by the company. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, I'm told by the owners that after approaching a number of federal agencies, including ECBC, ACOA, that officials of ECBC approached NSBI. So even though they didn't receive a direct solicitation, they did, in fact, they have known about this issue now since the very first week of November. So I wonder if the acting Minister of Economic Development could tell the House what, if anything, his government has done over the last 4 weeks since they were first approached to provide support for this company.
The Honourable Acting Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I repeat, obviously we're very concerned about the situation with this company. We're prepared to work with the company. The company needs to approach the province of Nova Scotia through its agency, NSBI, or directly through the Office of Economic Development. When that happens, the application will be reviewed. The process is quite clear. They need to directly approach us about what they need. Thank you.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, my recollection, Mr. Speaker, is that the job of the Department of Economic Development and the job of NSBI is to seek to find business and to retain them. And if they know that there's a business employing 150 people who are having difficulty, there must be some onus on the department to take initiative to try and seek a remedy to that problem. I don't understand it, Mr. Speaker. You know, I find it ironic that a Tory leadership candidate who on Monday said he didn't support government loans to businesses said in Cape Breton on Tuesday that he would have helped Glace Bay Fisheries. So my question for the acting minister is, what will it take for you to step in and help these people get back to work?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I refer that to the Minister of, I'll refer the question to the Minister of Fisheries and Agriculture.
The Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's my pleasure to stand and speak on this one quickly. There is a meeting going on today that includes the Department of Economic Development, NSBI, ECBC, and those people that would be interested in maintaining the functioning of that fish plant to make sure that we help protect the jobs that are there. But, Mr. Speaker, there's also a greater piece that we're trying to do within the Department of Fisheries is to look at the processing in the province. Mr. Speaker, we are over capacity right now for the amount of quota that is being caught off of our shores. And at this point, we are looking at more opportunities to expand different markets, to look at different products, and we're hoping we'll be able to do that. But there's a meeting going on today, and we hope they'll have a positive outcome.
Recognize the honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the acting Minister of Economic Development. Mr. Speaker, of course, as we know, on Monday of this week, the people of Glace Bay awoke to have 150 less jobs in our area. It's an echo from you, not from me. The Glace Bay Fish Plant, which, Mr. Speaker, happens to also be on the second largest private employer in Glace Bay, may be a joke to the NDP, but certainly not to me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, these employees are being laid off just weeks before the holidays. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't have to say this, but I will. This has dealt an incredible blow to the people of Glace Bay. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, it highlights the lack of attention that some areas seem to be getting from this government, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the minister is, what is this minister prepared to do to ensure that those 150 employees can return to work at the Glace Bay Fish Plant?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much. As I indicated, Mr. Speaker, the situation is quite clear. This company did not directly approach the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, it's a passing strange that the honourable member is complaining that we didn't help a company who never asked for help from us, while at the same time his Liberal friends in Ottawa were asked for help and didn't give it.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the rural areas of this province are struggling and individuals are working day in and day out to maintain all the towns and villages and rural routes, but there's no attention, no assistance from this government. The people of Glace Bay, who are close to their roots, at one time fishing was one of the largest industries there in Glace Bay. More times than not, it's stagnant now, Mr. Speaker. So my question, since the acting Minister of Economic Development won't answer, my question is to the Minister of Fisheries and Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, I ask the Minister, since your colleague doesn't seem to have a plan to develop the economy of Glace Bay, what are you planning to do to ensure that those fisheries jobs there now are not lost?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I informed the House just in the last question by the opposition, was that there is a meeting going on today. As the minister is quite correct that there had been no approach to the provincial government at this point. They had approached ECBC, they had approached ACOA to look at that help. They apparently said no. So we're looking at it right now, trying to pick up those pieces and try to ensure that those positions are held in Glace Bay.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Fisheries is quick to point out that there's a meeting this afternoon. I know. I arranged it, Mr. Speaker. Because that area is in crisis right now, I had to call up the Office of Economic Development, NSBI, and put them at the table with Rick Beaton from Enterprise Cape Breton Corporation and the good MP for the area, Roger Cuzner, Mr. Speaker. So they're there dealing with a crisis that this government has done absolutely nothing about. They didn't even take the initiative after it occurred to offer the help to Glace Bay. That's the problem, Mr. Speaker. So my question for the Minister of Acting Economic Development again. In less than a month, since November 10th, your office has awarded over $1 million to companies, many of which are nowhere near rural areas of this province. I want to ask the acting minister, what is your office doing for rural areas in this province? What is your office going to do for Glace Bay to ensure that it doesn't become a ghost town?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very simply, this government, Nova Scotia Business Inc., and the Office of Economic Development are committed to economic development in all parts of Nova Scotia, and most particularly rural Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, we will help this company after reviewing the information in a way that is appropriate. And Mr. Speaker, that's why the meeting is happening this afternoon, when someone finally requested it.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, in April 2005, Medic Delivery Services of Dartmouth won the tender bid to process biomedical waste. Now, Mr. Speaker, their small business success story turned into a nightmare a few months later when the contract was cancelled because they asked to relocate the proposed site from Mount Uniacke to Burnside. Medical Waste Management, an Ontario company who threatened to sue the government over the tendering process, was then awarded the contract. So my question for the Minister of Health is this: the location had no point value in the tendering process, so why was it used as an excuse to cancel Medic Delivery's contract?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The original contract, was awarded on the basis of the response to the tender call. And it became very clear, Mr. Speaker, that the company was unable to respond to the details as set out in their response to the tender call. To have continued to award them that contract, Mr. Speaker, would have been contrary to the contract which they had entered into with the province, and for that reason, Mr. Speaker, we had to consider the next candidate in response to the tender call.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is that Medic Delivery Services would have been able to meet its time frame if it had been allowed to move the operation to Burnside. But this government called the location worth nothing in the bidding process, a fundamental deviation from the original proposal, and used it as an excuse to cancel the contract. Yet the Ontario company is locating its operations where? in Burnside, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Minister of Health was, why was locating in Burnside a problem for a Nova Scotia company that had the contract, but it's perfectly acceptable from a big company from Ontario?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the awarding of the contract was not an issue of location as much as process. And the process that was set out by the original, in the original contract that was awarded was a process that was going to be fundamentally changed as a result of changing the location of their operation. And that is the reason that the contract was not continued with that company, because their process was going to have to change in order for them to comply with the contract.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Speaker, I believe that the principals of that company are going to be very surprised to hear that answer, because that's not what they were told. Mr. Speaker, documents obtained through FOI show a backroom deal with the Ontario company was in the works while the Department of Health was still playing the concerned partner with Medic Delivery. Medic Delivery is also losing its contract to transport biomedical waste, which it has held for years. This is another in a string of Nova Scotia companies that have been abandoned by this government, just like Snares Bakery, just like Glace Bay Fisheries, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask the acting Minister of Economic Development, is this his government's idea of supporting Nova Scotia businesses?
The Acting Minister of Economic Development.
I'll refer that to the Minister of Health.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, that we in the Department of Health did our utmost to try and create an environment where we could have continued to provide that contract to the original company, which is a Nova Scotia company. However, Mr. Speaker, the details of the response to the tender call were not able to be met by that company. That was unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, but it was the situation that faced us, and we took the action that is normally taken in those circumstances and looked at the next bidder on the list.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Tourism, Heritage and Culture. According to the Nova Scotia 2006 Tourism Plan, overnight visitation to this province is down 5% over the past season. That's 5%, Mr. Speaker. New Brunswick, however, expects room occupancy to be up by 2%, and Prince Edward Island is also reporting an increase. So my question to the Minister is, why is Nova Scotia the only maritime province where tourism is actually down in 2005?
Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And indeed, we face challenges, as did many jurisdictions. Now, Mr. Speaker, what the member doesn't say is that PEI, indeed, I believe it was 11% drop they had last year, while we had a 5% increase. So the fact that they are going up is not a bad thing for them, and we applaud them for that. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is we have an excellent plan put forward for 2006. We're working with our partners, and we expect to see growth in the future, Mr. Speaker.
I'll member for Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, what the minister doesn't say is that tourism operators around this province say they've been declining for the last 3 years. This minister has provided excuse after excuse after excuse. He blamed the high Canadian dollar, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if anyone has told him that New Brunswick and PEI use Canadian currency. He's blamed the high gas prices. I wonder if he's compared gas prices in New Brunswick and PEI to Nova Scotia. They are comparable. He's blamed the fact that we've had lack of American tourists, Mr. Speaker. New Brunswick shares a common border with the United States, and while their American tourists are down, their numbers are up. Mr. Speaker, those two provinces are not providing excuses, they're providing leadership. So my question to the minister is, when will you and your department show some leadership and provide tourism operators with a real vision for growth and perhaps, just maybe perhaps, a little bit of hope?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, far be it from me to argue with the Liberals who know very much, a lot about low numbers, Mr. Speaker, for sure. Now, the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that we have an excellent plan. In fact, last night, Mr. Speaker, last night I met with representatives of the Tourism Partnership Council, and they have done an excellent job for this province in the past number of years. They will do an excellent job in the future, Mr. Speaker. I have confidence in the industry. The industry has confidence in the plan, and we'll move forward with that plan, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, what do Lunenburg, Queens, Argyll, Yarmouth, Clare, Digby, Annapolis, and Kings County have in common?
They're all Nova Scotia.
They are not part of this tourism vision. The other thing they have in common, Mr. Speaker, and this Liberal knows numbers. There's 11 provincial constituencies this year, which will deliver 47 delegates to a convention in February. And these are the very parts of this province that were devastated by the tourism season last year. There is nothing to address the 75% decline of visitors in the Gold River Estates Bed and Breakfast in New Ross. Nothing to help King George and Annapolis Royal, which suffered a 25% decline in their operating deficit, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the minister is, what are you doing to prevent a repeat of the devastating tourism season for Nova Scotia?
Now, Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Speaker, it is obvious the member and his party have not taken a look at the plan put forward, Mr. Speaker. The industry is aware of the plan. The places that the member remarked upon played a very important role in putting forward the plan for 2006. I have confidence in that plan. And, Mr. Speaker, we will see our numbers increase in 2006, and I have no doubt that the industry will continue to be resilient, will continue to have a good plan, a solid plan, and will continue to grow into the future.
Now, Member Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. In
Order,
November,
order,
a
please.
report on
Order, please. Question was for
Minister of Health.
Minister of Health. Thank you.
In November, a report on the wait times to see a pain specialist showed that the QE2 clinic has the longest waits in all of Atlantic Canada, Mr. Speaker.
Shameful.
The average wait time is nearly 2 years in Nova Scotia, but it can soar as high as 5 years to get into the QE2 clinic. In fact, the doctors at the clinic are only accepting urgent referrals so that they can address the backlog of patients waiting to be seen. So my question to the Minister of Health, why is your government wasting time and money studying the problem instead of working with the frontline staff to address the long waits to get help for chronic pain sufferers in Nova Scotia?
Good question, David Wilson.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member indeed touches upon an issue that is of significance to a number of Nova Scotians. But, Mr. Speaker, when you approach an issue as significant as this, you want to make sure that you get it right, and you get it right from the very beginning. And that means that we have to ensure that we have the appropriate resources, not just in the pain clinic here in Halifax, but we have appropriate resources distributed throughout the province. And it's appropriate for us, Mr. Speaker, to take some of the money which we put into the budget last year because we consider this a priority, and use that in order to ensure that as we respond in the future, we will be responding correctly and serving the best interests of all Nova Scotians on a go-forward basis.
Honourable Member Sackville-Cobequid on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this government has had nearly 7 years to fix the problem for these patients who are suffering from chronic pain, Mr. Speaker. One of the groups of patients who are caught in a catch-22 situation are the patients waiting 2 years or more for orthopedic surgery, as well as other procedures, Mr. Speaker. They often are in tremendous pain while they continue to wait for surgery. But the wait times at the pain clinic are equally long, so they have few options to alleviate their suffering, Mr. Speaker. Several patients have called my office and said that their wait times in the pain clinic actually exceed the anticipated wait time for surgery. So I asked the Minister of Health, how much longer will patients have to endure debilitating pain every day before this government takes action to address the unacceptable wait times for chronic pain sufferers?
Another 5 years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the fact is that we are taking action. We took action through last year's budget with the inclusion of $300,000 to begin to address the challenge of wait times in pain. That initiative, Mr. Speaker, will continue, and it will become a part of the business cycle for the coming year. Mr. Speaker, it is not something that can be resolved through simply snapping the finger. It requires resources that are in short supply, and a major part of that, of course, is recruitment, Mr. Speaker. We will work at it. It is a priority, and we will continue to have it as a priority of this government.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the action this provincial government has taken isn't working. The waits have increased year after year since they've been in government, Mr. Speaker. Helen Tupper, a chronic pain patient and advocate, was recently quoted in an article in the Chronicle Herald, which I'll table, Mr. Speaker, saying, I quote, "Chronic pain has become known as the invisible epidemic," end quote, Mr. Speaker. Many Nova Scotians wake up every day knowing they'll have to endure pain and have to continue to wait to get relief, Mr. Speaker. So my final question to the Minister of Health is this: how can he justify these dramatically increasing pain clinic wait times to Nova Scotians?
Good question. Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I indicated in my answer to the first supplementary, we have clearly indicated our intention to make a resolution of this wait time issue a priority of the government. We included money in last year's budget. I've indicated that it will be part of the business planning cycle for the coming year. And, Mr. Speaker, we are determined that this issue will continue as a priority of government, and it will, through the planning process we have put in place, begin to roll out a resolution to this issue which will be suitable to the needs of all Nova Scotians.
Thank you. Recognize all member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions for the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. Temperature outside the House today will remind everyone in the House of the challenges facing many Nova Scotians in heating their homes this winter. This government's answer to all those people on low, moderate and fixed incomes is to offer them a one-time rebate. The income thresholds to qualify for the rebate exclude a great many Nova Scotians who badly need this help. In fact, the federal rebate program has income thresholds that will allow 20,000 more Nova Scotians to qualify than the provincial rebate program does. So my first question to the Minister: what does the Minister have to say to those 20,000 Nova Scotians about why the federal government thinks they need help, but this government doesn't?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the big difference between the federal government and the provincial government is the federal government has billions in surplus, and the provincial government continues to operate with its balanced budget approach. But I would point out to the member opposite and to all Nova Scotians that the province of Nova Scotia has the most generous program to support low-income Nova Scotians with their heat this year.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons for that may be that people in neighbouring provinces are getting an even bigger break on their fuel oil heating costs than Nova Scotians. Because of the regulation of heating oil prices in Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland and Labrador, prices for heating oil have been between 4 and 5 cents a litre cheaper over the last few months than in Nova Scotia. This is in addition to the fact that in PEI there's no provincial sales tax applied to heating oil, which means their citizens have been saving an average of 10.5 cents per litre over the past 2 months. So my question to the Minister: when will he re-examine his stance on regulation of home heating oil and put the welfare of Nova Scotians ahead of ideology?
Now, the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what I'd say to the member opposite is that, again, we have the most generous program in the country to help low-income Nova Scotians, and I would dispute the member's findings that the fuel oil prices in New Brunswick and I believe Newfoundland are lower than they are in Nova Scotia. In fact, a recent search of the internet would show that the prices in Nova Scotia are the same or lower, depending on where you buy the fuel, Mr. Speaker.
I'll member Halifax Fairview on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I think the Minister better go back and check his facts. Record high heating oil prices and this government's steadfast refusal to remove the unfair HST from heating oil are forcing Nova Scotians to make hard choices between heat and food, choices between paying their bills and filling their tanks, choices that no one should be forced to make. My question to the Minister: when will this government give Nova Scotians a real break, a permanent break, and take the provincial portion of the HST off all sources of home heating fuel?
Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite, the province of Nova Scotia has the most generous program in the country to support low-income Nova Scotians. But I would point out to the member opposite that his facts are incorrect. The prices for home heating oil in Nova Scotia has declined since the fall, Mr. Speaker, and continue to decline so that we can support and the industry can support valid and appropriate industry.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, on October 18, 2005, I questioned the Minister of Community Services on his lack of commitment when it comes to providing support for single parents while attending university. Today, Mr. Speaker, the Changes Coalition, in partnership with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, are presenting a research paper which finds that single-parent families headed by university students face budget deficits of between $180 and $415 per month. This, Mr. Speaker, does not include the annual $12,750 accrued in student debt as a result of the skyrocketing tuition this government is responsible for burdening students with in this province. My question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, why does the minister continue to allow single parents who only want to create a better life for themselves and their children go deeper and deeper in debt?
Recognize the Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the member opposite bringing up the question. And basically, the question is low-income Nova Scotian single parents. The parent wants to go to university to enhance their career prospects. And, Mr. Speaker, that is a laudable goal. It is perhaps not a goal that would necessarily come under employment support and income assistance, but it is a goal where government should be playing a role. I did meet with the Changes Coalition. We had a very good discussion back in the summer. A number of initiatives have come out of it, and as the member opposite knows, just this past month, we made an announcement to help single parents that want to go to Cape Breton University cover their accommodation costs.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the minister states that government should be playing a role, but the reality is they are not. Mr. Speaker, this is another example of an uncaring minister and an uncaring government. Single parents who, Mr. Speaker, are primarily women only want the best possible future for themselves and their children. Yet this minister continues to put up barriers which will result in single parents and their families going deeper and deeper into debt in order to create a better future. Mr. Speaker, the minister is well aware of the facts being outlined in the paper released today. He knows that his government can do something to help these families by enabling them to attend university and break themselves from the cycle of poverty. My question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, given the statistics revealed today, will this minister commit to revising his discriminatory policy so that single parents can go to university and make a better life for themselves and their families?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as a follow-up to the question from earlier in this session, and indeed the commitments that were made with the Changes Coalition when they came into the Department of Community Services and met with me and my senior staff, the two areas that were identified by Catherine Reid, who authored this analysis, that showed that accommodation and childcare expenses were the two biggest gaps, the two biggest barriers to being able to go to university. And Mr. Speaker, what we are doing with this pilot project is we're addressing the biggest one, which is the accommodation barrier, and we look forward to also working on the childcare one.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton South on your final supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Maybe, Mr. Speaker, if this minister would hire more social workers as the department instead of bean counters, he may finally get it, what's not happening in his particular department in dealing with the concerns of single parents, particularly women who are trying to better their lives and the lives of their children. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, the minister doesn't care, so I'll try another minister. According to a fact sheet produced by the Status of Women in 2001, women must have a university education before their earnings surpass those of men with less than a high school levels of education. Given, Mr. Speaker, this government is barring access to a university education for single parents, who, Mr. Speaker, by the way, are primarily women, I would ask the minister responsible for the Status of Women to stand up and support single parents who want to attend university when her agency reports that a university education is needed for women to earn more than men who have a high school diploma.
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Status of Women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Status of Women definitely does recognize and support that women do need higher levels of education in order to receive higher wages. Women in this province earn 3/4 of what men earn in the same positions, generally speaking. Having said that, that is why this government supports women in the community college, has allowed for seats there, and do continue to support women to receive higher education.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, Sean Martell is a second-year honours business student at Cape Breton University. Sean has severe cerebral palsy and requires full-time assistance to finish his degree. Mr. Speaker, Sean has to travel to and from home every day at great expense to his family. Because the Minister's Department has refused to fund an assistant who would support him to live in the CBU residence. Mr. Speaker, when is the Minister's Department going to ensure Sean has the same rights as everyone else and provide evening and weekends care so he can live on campus accommodations?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and we have dealt with this question in the past, and
Order, please. Order, please.
Is that there are a number of very good policies in place which this young man and others, other students like him are able to take advantage of, which allows them to attend post-secondary institutions. And Mr. Speaker, they are taking advantage of these programs. There are always further things that we would like to be able to do to assist students in order to be able to live at the same level as everyone else. That is a challenge that we face and continue to face. I have indicated in the past that the student in question and others like him may in fact qualify for our new program, which is coming into effect in January of this year, and he will be evaluated as a candidate for that program at that time.
The honourable member Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the university has offered Sean suitable living space. The president of the student union in CBU has offered to donate part of his salary to pay for an assistant. The Department of Education is paying for a daytime assistant.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member Cape Breton Nova has the floor.
Again, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the university has offered Sean suitable living space. The president of the student union in Cape Breton University has offered to donate part of his salary to pay for an assistant. The Department of Education is paying for a daytime assistant. His family is supporting him in his determination to succeed in life. Sean's father said recently that the department is going to have to support Sean throughout his life, so they may as well support him in his determination to get his degree and find a good job. Mr. Speaker, my second question is, when is the minister going to provide assistance for all disabled people to live full, productive lives with the same opportunities as everyone else?
Hear, hear. The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and the fact that the honourable member referenced the support that's provided by the Department of Education and support provided by community services allows individuals and students such as the student that the honourable member refers to be able to take advantage of educational opportunities. And as they are able to respond and able to take advantage of those opportunities, the result is that we face further challenges with respect to allowing them to live full and complete lives. And that's a real challenge that faces all of us, Mr. Speaker, and it is one that may be addressed in the very near future, depending upon the applicant and whether or not he's determined to be a candidate that would qualify. And we will be looking at that, Mr. Speaker. But the honourable member does point out, a situation which is a real challenge.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the minister is right. He does receive help from the Department of Education, Department of Community Services, and so now he needs help from the Department of Health. Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, Sean Martell is trying to become an independent adult and is studying business so he can contribute to Nova Scotia's economy and society. Paying for an attendant for him to live in residence is an investment rather than a cost. Mr. Speaker, my final question is, will you give a commitment to Sean to have his funding in place in early 2006?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I pointed out the assistance that's provided by the other levels of government because the honourable member references us as being an uncaring government. The fact is we do care, and we want to provide opportunities for students such as Sean. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell the honourable member and members of the House that his application will be evaluated very carefully in the new year.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community Services. This week, the leader of the Federal Conservative Party admitted that if elected, his party intends to gut the early childhood learning and care initiatives in favor of a form of baby bonuses. The minister's federal cousins do not support what everyone else in the world seems to agree is the best model for educating and caring for our children. So I would like to give the minister a chance to state for the record, does the plan for child care funding presently awaiting provincial cabinet approval ensure quality, universal, affordable, and accessible child care will continue and be strengthened in Nova Scotia in the future?
The honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, on your first supplementary.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Speaker, the planning for early childhood education has been done behind closed doors, following consultations which stakeholders have described as less than useful. The plan is due to be released this month. In fact, it is required by the federal or the bilateral agreement to be released this month. Yet we have heard nothing about a release date. Perhaps the government will be tempted to delay release until after the election. So I'd like to ask the minister, what assurances can he offer that the timing of the release of the plan for using the bilateral agreement child care funding will not be affected by the federal election?
The honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate the chance to point out that the consultations on improving the whole child care delivery system in Nova Scotia have been ongoing before we even knew that there was going to be a new early learning and child care agreement. So the consultations with the working group from both the nonprofit and the commercial centres has been going on. There's been something like 13 meetings which included the Deputy Minister. The first one included me and actually was called at my request, and it's been a very positive experience. Since that time, we have gone to a public consultation. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it was overwhelmingly well received. There was a lot of participation. Over 2,300 parents and child care workers made submissions. It's been a well-researched plan, and it is currently being deliberated before Cabinet.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, and your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to disagree with the minister. The advisory committee, given that he includes as part of that early consultation, is made up of a few selected representatives from the sector, and there's been no broad consultation within the sector. And also, the public consultation was fast-tracked, and the people attending those meetings were not given any assurance that their comments were going to be included or that their perspectives were going to be included in the plan. In fact, they asked to have a copy of the report going from the consultants to the department, and were told that that was not available. So, Mr. Speaker, getting back to my original point, the federal Conservative leader talks about choice. But if this minister continues to allow centres to close for lack of funding and inability to find qualified staff, as we've seen most recently in the only licensed childcare centre in Queens County closing, families will have very few choices indeed. My final question to the minister, when will his childcare plan be released so that the public, especially the parents of young children in this province, have a chance to provide feedback before plans are finalized in 2006, keeping in mind that the funding for this current fiscal year has not been dispersed yet? Thank you.
Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and indeed it's good to be able to point out the tremendous participation in the consultation process, and as the member opposite has pointed out, we did move expeditiously to facilitate this. We wanted Nova Scotians' input. We got their input. We're very pleased with the participation rate, and it was all to try to accommodate the deadline.
Thank you. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Since we last sat in this House, individuals both inside and outside the healthcare system have spoken out on the long-term care bed crisis this government has created. Mr. Speaker, from the CEO of the South Shore DHA to a councillor in Port Hawkesbury, all have stated that the lack of long-term care beds is creating longer wait times as there are fewer and fewer beds available for surgery patients to recuperate. Mr. Speaker, over the last couple of weeks, contacts with all of the DHAs have found that there are 412 patients assessed or waiting to be assessed for long-term care placement. All 412 are occupying either medical, surgical beds or ALC beds in acute care facilities. Whatever the case, Mr. Speaker, beds are being blocked by patients who deserve to receive care in more appropriate settings. So my question for the Minister is, Mr. Speaker, why has the Minister allowed this crisis to happen?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this government has, through the last budget, begun to address this situation. We have included close to 300 additional beds in the provisions for 300 additional beds in the last budget. We will be receiving the results of the province-wide consultation, which, Mr. Speaker, which will allow us to make appropriate decisions with respect to the location and numbers of additional beds throughout the province, and we will be acting on that as soon as the report becomes available, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we have a crisis in the healthcare system because this government and this minister have failed to plan. They failed to meet their 1999 promise that ensured that people get the right care at the right times at the right cost. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are waiting longer and longer for surgery as a result of this government's failure to plan and manage the healthcare system. My question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, when will this minister finally come forward with a comprehensive continuing care plan that will ensure that patients get the right care in the right place at the right cost, just like the Premier promised in 1999?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, indeed, we did make commitments with respect to health care in 1999. And the first thing we had to do when we became government, Mr. Speaker, was to restore the loss of nurses that occurred in this province as a result of the policies of that party when they were the government. We had to recruit the additional doctors that they chased out of the province. That, Mr. Speaker, is not. It took them 5 to 6 years to chase them all away, Mr. Speaker. We've started bringing them back, Mr. Speaker. That was the first fundamental challenge that we had to meet as a government. We have a plan being developed, Mr. Speaker, that the honourable member refers to. That plan will be unveiled to all Nova Scotians, and it will reflect a province-wide consultation that will give us a very clear direction in which we should move in the future. We could only do that if we, first of all, restored the numbers that they had decimated while they were the government of this province.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Glace Bay has final supplementary.
This minister, this government has been in power now for almost 7 years. Almost 7 years, and they're still working on a plan. Still working on a plan, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please.
Mr. Speaker, you know, this is just an example, Mr. Speaker. how these government members can thump their chests about something that's in a crisis, something such as health care, Mr. Speaker. The public knows the difference, Mr. Speaker. The public knows the difference. We have a health care crisis. 412 patients in this province are in hospital beds instead of in more appropriate care settings. It's not just the CEO at the South Shore or the councillor in Port Hawkesbury or myself as the Liberal health critic who says we're in a crisis. On May 17th of this year, it was your Premier that said we have a health care crisis. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister, could the Minister please indicate why he thinks it's acceptable that 412 people in this province are in hospital beds that are so desperately needed to reduce wait times in this province?
Now, Minister of Health.
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, I've never, ever suggested that that is something with which I am satisfied. That, Mr. Speaker, is why we included in the last budget provisions for additional long-term care beds in this province, Mr. Speaker, and that is why we will have a very comprehensive plan in which to move forward, Mr. Speaker. We will address this challenge, Mr. Speaker, and we will do it appropriately, and we will do it in a very planned, methodical manner, Mr. Speaker, and we have begun that, and we began the process in the last budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Acting Minister of Economic Development. Mr. Speaker, the Trenton Car Works in Pictou County has long played a very important role in the economy of Pictou County. And last week, this major employer laid off close to 400 workers, leaving a serious impact on our workers, our economy, and our whole community. So, Mr. Speaker, the problem is that a lot of the orders now are going to Mexico instead of the Trenton Works. So without more orders coming this way, these jobs may well be gone for good, and the remaining jobs may soon follow. So my question through you to the Minister is, what action is the Acting Minister's Department taking to help secure orders for Trenton Works?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate the question from the honourable member. And it's a very, very important question because that's a vital employer in Pictou County in central Nova Scotia. In fact, I understand the Premier has met with officials from Trenton Works to discuss the matter. The government is prepared to help in any way which Trenton Works feels would be helpful in dealing with their concerns. My understanding is that the offer is open to help Trenton Works in any way that management can believe would be helpful.
Honourable member for Pictou West on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, these 400 jobs, they're well-paying, skilled jobs, and they help to keep our young people in Pictou County. And they're going to be hard to replace, especially in rural Nova Scotia. And for many, there will be no option but to leave. So I think it's going to require some action from government. It's going to help these young workers and help them stay in the Pictou County. Things like retraining allowance or upgrading skills at our community college. So again, through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Acting Minister, what role do you see the Office of Economic Development playing to assist these laid-off workers?
Honourable the Acting Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We believe our role in government is to assist that company in any way possible. There are obviously issues about competition. If there are issues about competition within which the government can be helpful, we were prepared to work with them. Not only are our doors open to that company, we will do everything in our power to assist that company in reestablishing their workforce.
The honourable member for Pictou West on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we need to keep these jobs in Pictou County. It's vital to our local economy. And to do this is going to take a concerted effort on the parts of everybody that's involved, the management, the union, government, and certainly the community involvement. So again, Mr. Speaker, what role does the department feel it can play in bringing all these parties together in a concerted effort to bring about a positive outcome for Trenton Works and for Pictou County?
Now, the Acting Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you that this issue is very much on the government's radar screen. In fact, I know the issue was raised by the Premier with a meeting with officials of Canadian National Railways to look at issues of cost, which would be helpful. We're working with with Canadian National Railways, with the company, and we will assist them in any way they ask to deal with reestablishing orders.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Acting Minister of Energy. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians would be aware that Stora Enso, located in Point Upper, Richmond County, is being faced with an electricity increase of over 30%. Mr. Speaker, the pulp and paper industry is facing an enormous number of challenges in the global marketplace, but the problems at Stora Enso are being exacerbated by the prospect of another unreasonable rate increase here in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, there are 500 direct jobs at Stora Enso, with thousands of support and spin-off jobs affecting every community throughout the Strait area and eastern Nova Scotia. So my question to the Acting Minister is, what exactly is the Minister and this government planning to do to mitigate the impact of the high cost of electricity on Stora Enso and other pulp and paper mills throughout the province?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the Stora industry is not only incredibly important to the Strait area, it's incredibly important to the province of Nova Scotia. And the government certainly recognizes the effect of high electricity costs, not only to Stora but to all the mills across this province. And Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the government will do whatever it possibly can to take care of the concerns of Stora and other mills across the province of Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that will be very little comfort to the families of the unionized employees who voted to go out on strike to know that this government doesn't have a plan and has refused to do anything. Let's look at what the government had the opportunity to do. They could have said no rate hearing this year because of the increase already this spring. They could have said no 2 rate hearings under 1 year and could have put that into law. Instead, the government chose not to act on those 2 matters. Instead, they decide to send what they call an advocate to sit at the hearings and watch another increase hit Nova Scotians. This government has been given an opportunity to show leadership. This is impacting not only Nova Scotia families, it's impacting jobs. We saw Trenton Car Works. Now we're seeing the impact at Stora, where there is a legitimate fear that the newsprint section will be closed down permanently if this strike takes place and if this power rate increase takes place. So my question to the Minister is, why does this Conservative government continue to cozy up to Nova Scotia Power and allow rate increases that are costing Nova Scotians their jobs?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Speaker, I think the honourable member is probably alluding to the fact that he introduced a bill in this House which would have precluded more than 1 rate hearing in a year, and I think that he recognized the fact that the government looked very favorably on that bill. However, however, Mr. Speaker, it got to be rather late in this particular session to call to call that bill and to progress it. However, I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, that is something that we can look at in the spring session. Mr. Speaker, the rate hearings for Nova Scotia Power are not yet completed, and on the completion of those hearings, Mr. Speaker, we will have further to say with regard to rate increases.
The honourable member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
You know, Mr. Speaker, everyone in Nova Scotia knows there's going to be an increase in electricity rates in this province. The question is, how much of an increase? Stora, Abitibi Paper are already being told what to expect in increases. 30% is what Stora is looking at. They are currently uncompetitive compared to mills in other provinces. An extra 30% pretty much wipes them out on competitiveness in the newsprint section. Yet this government talks about solutions that were made available to them that they refuse to act on. And again, Nova Scotians are being put at risk. So my question again to the Minister, what is it going to take to get your government to finally stand up to Nova Scotia Power to protect Nova Scotians, protect families, and protect good-paying jobs here in this province?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Speaker, obviously the honourable member has been looking in his crystal ball and come up with what an increase is going to occur at the end of the present hearings that are going on to URB, Mr. Speaker. Let's not speculate.
The honourable member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Justice in his role as Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, I asked this question a few weeks ago and when we were in the House, and I want to ask the question again because we still don't have any evidence that this government is intending to replace Darth Fardy, who is the current Freedom of Information Review Officer, and his job ends on January 25th, 2006 at this point, which is only 6 weeks away. And this government still has not posted an ad, still has not posted this job for purposes of trying to hire a replacement for Mr. Fardy, who plays a very important role in this province as a watchdog with regard to how this government controls information. And to put it in perspective, Mr. Speaker, we just passed a resolution earlier today to appoint a new Auditor General. That process took over a year. And yet, in less than 6 weeks, we're going to be losing our review officer for Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, Mr. Speaker, and this government hasn't even begun the process of reappointing or appointing someone new, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask the Minister of Justice, can he stand in this House today and make a commitment as to when we will be beginning to commence the process of appointing a new review officer for the Freedom of Information Act?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the help from the Leader of the Opposition in suggesting the names of several highly qualified candidates. However, Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious issue. We will be appointing a new review officer, and the new review officer will be in place to make sure that there is no, that they'll be in place for the January 25th.
The Honourable Member Cole Harbour Passage on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, it would be easier to have confidence in the minister's statement, as equivocal as it was, Mr. Speaker, if we actually didn't see evidence in the past. For example, in the recent spring budget, the Financial Measures Act was passed that actually deleted any reference to the review office, the Freedom of Information Review Office, Mr. Speaker. And now we see that they are very, very, very slow in replacing someone who is leaving in less than 6 weeks, Mr. Speaker. So clearly, there are a lot of concerns voiced by people who are involved in accessing information from the government that this government is in the process of closing down the review office and rolling it into the Ombudsman office, so we would no longer have a dedicated review office under the FOIPOP Act, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask this minister, can he stand in this House today and commit to this House and to the people of Nova Scotia that we will continue to have in the future a review office under the Freedom of Information Act and that it will not be rolled into the Ombudsman's office?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you. And in as loud of words as I can muster, I will indicate to the honourable member we will have an independent review officer. That's what my commitment is.
The Honourable Member Cole Harbour Passage on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the minister might be willing to say we'll have an independent review officer. He didn't say we'd have an independent review office. And so, you know, this is again my concern. This minister in the spring, through the Financial Measures Act, makes no commitment to the office. Mr. Speaker, 6 weeks before this review officer, Mr. Fardy's leaving, we have no proof that he's willing to replace this person. We have no commitment to a full-time privacy commissioner, which many, in fact, we're the only province without one, Mr. Speaker. Again, proof that this government does not have a lot of concern for freedom of information and for the need to ensure that we're going to be able to have a dedicated office to protect the fundamental rights of Nova Scotia. So I want to ask this minister, when will the Minister of Justice admit he's extinguishing the Freedom of Information Office in this province and does not have a concern for ensuring we have this dedicated office protecting the fundamental rights of Nova Scotians?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, we're committed to a very effective Freedom of Information process, and we will have an independent Freedom of Information officer.
The Honourable Member Calvi, Clayton Park, you have about 15 seconds.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the Minister of Education if the Minister has any plans to address the urgent need for tuition support for first-year students, because the numbers are declining now in the province of Nova Scotia.
Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. Government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve in the Committee of the Whole House on bills.
Agreed? Carried.
Okay. We'll recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I believe the Bill 275 is presently being distributed, and I would move, Mr. Chairman, that we consider Bill 275, the Off-Highway Vehicle Act.
Bill 275, the Off-Highway Vehicle Act. Copies are being circulated, and perhaps we'll wait just a minute until they get all around. Okay, Bill 275, clauses 1, 2, and 3. Shall they carry? Clauses are carried. Clause 4. Shall they carry? It's carried. Clause 5. Shall they carry? Carried. Clause 6. 6 through 19. Shall all the clauses carry? Carried. Shall the title carry? Recognize the member for Cape Breton South.
Recorded vote on this.
Request for a recorded vote.
Recorded vote.
On the... Can I clarify that? Is it on the title or on the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
the Government House Leader?
That the recorded vote will be on the bill. Agreed.
Shall all the clauses carry?
Carry.
Shall the title carry?
Carry.
Shall the bill carry? Or is a recorded vote on the bill? The request is to ring the bells. How long do you need? Five minutes, the bell shall ring. Till 1:25.
can vote it on.
Okay, the House will now come back to order, and I'm going to ask the whips if they are satisfied. Yes? Yes? Are the whips satisfied on the government side? Mr. Whip, are you satisfied with your government caucus? Okay. I'll now ask the clerk to call the vote.
Mr. Clark.
Absent.
Mr. Morse.
Yes.
Mr. Rodney McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Ron Russell.
Yes.
Mr. Ham. Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Muir.
Yes.
Mr. Christie.
Yes.
Mr. Fage.
Absent.
Mr. McIsaac.
Yes.
Ms. Bulver Getson.
Yes.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Yes.
Mr. Hurlbert.
Yes.
Mr. Burnett.
Yes.
Mr. Morash.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
No.
Mr. DeWolf.
Absent.
Mr. Dukes.
No.
Mr. Chisholm.
No.
Mr. McKinnon.
Yes.
Mr. Langell.
Light's not on.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah. Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
No.
Still not on.
Mr. Hines.
No.
Mr. Parent.
Yes.
Ms. Stretch.
Yes.
Ms. Massey.
Yes.
Mr. McDonnell.
Yes.
Mr. Corbett.
Yes.
Ms. Maureen McDonald. Mr. Dexter.
Yes.
Mr. DeVoe.
Yes.
Mr. Manning McDonald.
No.
Mr. Sampson.
No.
Mr. Glavine.
No.
Mr. Wilson.
No.
Mr. Colwell.
No.
Mr. Terrio.
No.
Mr. Sampson.
No.
Ms. Whalen.
No.
Mr. McNeil.
No.
Mr. Gadet.
No.
Mr. Steele.
Yes.
Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Parker. Yes. Ms. Raymond.
Yes.
Mr. Epstein.
Yes.
Mr. Pye.
Yes.
Mr. Goss.
Yes.
Mr. David A. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Estabrooks.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the results of 30 in favor, 15 opposed.
The bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that your committee do now rise and report this bill.
It is carried.
Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House and Bills reports.
The committee has met and considered one bill, namely Bill 275, Chairman's been recommended, or has recommended this bill, or does recommend this bill for favorable consideration of the House without amendment.
Is agreed? Won't this bill be read for a third time?
Now.
Agreed? Agreed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call the order of business public bills for third reading?
Public bills for third reading.
Would you please call Bill number 275, the Off-Highways Vehicle Act?
Bill number 275. You can move it. You can move it. The Honourable Government House Leader.
No, go ahead.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Speaker, I move Bill 275 for the third reading.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 275. Is House ready for the question? All those in favor? The Honourable Member Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak to Bill 275, an act to amend the Off-Highway Vehicles Act. First of all, let me clearly state the Liberal caucus's disappointment with the end result that we are faced with here today in Bill 275. The OHV task force worked tirelessly on the 39 recommendations, 39, they put forward to government in a report released over a year ago. Collectively, these dedicated task force members volunteered the equivalent of 1,000 working days preparing their report. In doing this, they participated in 24 community hall meetings, met with numerous stakeholder and community organizations, reviewed hundreds of research papers, and considered thousands of detailed written submissions. It was the largest public consultation ever within our province. They provided government with everything they needed: the proper research, public consultation, recommendations, and strategies. However, government chose to ignore their advice. I want to thank these dedicated volunteers for all their time, their expertise, and efforts on behalf of the Liberal caucus. They have served their province well, and they should be proud of the work that they have accomplished, despite the lack of respect government has demonstrated since the release of their report. The Liberal caucus also wants to thank all those who came forward during the law amendments process on either side of the issue to once again to fight for what they believed in. Anyone sitting in on those presentations heard a very, very clear message: protect our children and our environment. Our caucus firmly believes that this bill will do neither adequately. The government and NDP would argue that this bill is far better than what we presented originally. Well, Mr. Speaker, that isn't saying much, frankly. The reality is that the bill has grown stronger in some areas because of the constant pressure that the medical community, the environment groups, and the private landowners have placed upon the government each and every day since the release of the government's pathetic action plan. This bill is fraught with gaps and problems. This bill satisfies the needs of no one as it stands right now. No one. The medical community has been ignored. The environmental groups have to a good extent been ignored. This bill does not reflect what Nova Scotians asked for. Our caucus has always put forth the safety of children before petty politics. Our leader in our caucus cannot, in good conscience, support a bill that we do not believe in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources to close debate on Bill number 275.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to all members of the House and all Nova Scotians. As we conclude debate and discussion on Bill 275, I would like to address 2 or 3 issues of the bill. Mr. Speaker, we are very dedicated to enforcing the law of this province. That's why we have dedicated 12 officers dedicated to the off-highway vehicle enforcement team. To coincide with the existing 72 officers that we have in the Department of Natural Resources conservation officers, Mr. Speaker, and making alliances with other enforcement officers in our province. Mr. Speaker, this bill enforces the regulations and the rules of this province for protected wilderness areas and sensitive areas in our province and our wildlife and our fish. This bill also, Mr. Speaker, ensures the safety of children and all Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. And I'm very pleased to be standing in my place today to close debate third reading of Bill 275. And Mr. Speaker, I can assure you and all members of this House and all Nova Scotians that as the Minister of Natural Resources, I will be meeting with ATVANS, I will be meeting with SANS, and all across Nova Scotians, speaking about the Off-Highway Vehicle Act. Mr. Speaker, as we move ahead to implement Bill 275, I also, as I committed in my action plan, Mr. Speaker, that we would have a task force outside of departmental offices, and we will be implementing that. And I thank the task force for the hard job that they did for all Nova Scotians. I also thank all the members that sat in law amendments, and we finally came up with a draft that we can hopefully pass here today. And I thank the witnesses that came in, Mr. Speaker. They had a concern for Nova Scotians. We listened to the concerns, and they're in the bill, Mr. Speaker. So with that, I close debate of Bill 275.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 275. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 275, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 323 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Off-Highway Vehicles Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that you now leave the chair and the House resolve the committee, the whole House on bills.
Is agreed? Carried.
I'll recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 219, the Trade Union Act?
Bill number 219, the Trade Union Act. The bill should be circulated with the amendments. Question's been called. Shall all the clauses carry as amended? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you please call Bill number 270, the Professional Planners Act?
Bill number 270, the Professional Planners Act. Recognize the member from Halifax-Chebucto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to speak in favor of this bill, and I wish to explain to members of the House where we are with respect to this bill and how we got here. This bill came forward from the member for Pictou East, who brought it forward as a private member's bill. This bill, when I saw it, I raised a number of points and objections and questions, and the bill went through some stages at this House, but was held off pending some talks with the association and with the Department of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Affairs, and with the sponsor of the bill. I have to say that all questions I think that I raised have been resolved, and I'm prepared not only to endorse the bill as it stands at the moment, but to make the amendments that have been agreed upon by all the consulting parties, since I think there's no one else here to do that, and I've taken an interest in it. So I'll wait till we get to the appropriate clauses and make the amendments.
The Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to endorse the remarks from the member for Halifax-Chebucto. This bill, in essence, has been around for a long, long time. It's been discussed and argued, and various professional bodies have been involved in honing the final draft that came into the House. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm very, very pleased that we've been able to progress in a way that has satisfied all the proponents as well as the antagonists to this bill in its original form. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that we've moved forward.
Okay, are you ready for the question? Okay, clauses number 1 to 8. Shall the clauses carry? Carried. Clause number 9. The member for Halifax Shabakto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to move the amendments to Clause 9 as indicated on the document that's been circulated to members of the House.
The question's been called for Clause 9 as amended. Shall the clause carry? Carried. Clauses 10 through 28. Carried. Clause number 29. The member for Halifax Shabakto.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Again, I would like to move the amendment of Clause 29 in accordance with the notes made on the amended bill that is before the members of the House.
Question's been called on Clause 29 as amendment. Shall the clause carry? Carried. That's all. Clauses 30 through 32, 34? Okay, clauses 30 through 32. Shall the clause carry? Okay, clause number 33, the member for Halifax Shabakto.
Mr. Chairman, again, thank you, and I wish to move the amendment of the bill in Clause 33 in accordance with the words that have been circulated to members of the House.
Clause 33 as amended. Shall the clause carry as amended? Carried. Clause 34. Shall the clause carry? Okay. Shall all the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 255, the Train Station in Cabooses Act?
Point of order, the member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
I don't believe that bill has been reported back yet from committee. It's here now, but it hasn't been reported back from committee. So, sorry, I was hoping that was something we might have been able to resolve before we went back into the committee of the whole, but I think we're going to have to go out of committee and come back in again. All right.
Point of order taken. The Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I move that your committee do now rise and report the bills that we have proceeded with through committee of the whole.
It is carried.
That's what I need. I'll just stay here. Chairman of the Committee, whole House, and bills reports.
The committee's met and considered two bills, Bills 219 and 270. Chairman recommends Bill 219 without amendment and Bill 270 with certain amendments.
Agreed? When should these bills be read for the third time? Agreed? Now, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Would you please revert to the order, with the concurrence of the House, Mr. Speaker, could we revert to the order of business presenting reports of committees?
Is it agreed? Presenting reports of committees. The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, as Chairman of the Committee on Private and Local Bills, I'm directed to report that the committee has met, considered the following bill, Bill number 255, an act to amend Chapter 14 of the Acts of 1995, the Train Station in Cabooses Act. Committee recommends this bill to the favorable consideration of the House without amendment.
Is it agreed? Or this bill be referred to the Committee of the whole House on Bills. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that you... Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair in the House resolve in the Committee of the whole House on bills.
Agreed? Carried.
Recognize the Government House Leader.
Welcome back, Mr. Chairman. Would you please call Bill number 255, the Train Station in Cabooses Act?
Bill number 255, the Train Station in Cabooses Act. Shall all the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? It is carried.
That your committee do now rise and report this bill.
It is carried.
Chairman of the committee hosts some bills reports.
That is met. Considered Bill 255. Chairman's been instructed to recommend it to the favorable consideration of the House without amendment.
Is it agreed? When should this bill be heard for a third time? Is it agreed? Agreed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call the order of business public bills for third reading?
Public bills for third reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 219, the Trade Union Act?
219. Order, please. The Honourable Member Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few short words on this. Mr. Speaker, this is, I think, in committee of the whole, the Government House Leader spoke probably what I wanted to say about this bill. This was a bill that's been around for some time. It's been vetted, and it's been, I think it's one of those things that you probably realize that you did something right when nobody's happy, or over the roof happy, Mr. Speaker. We've made considerable progress. The changes, I think, support people in the workplace and support the people that represent them in a direct way. But it's one of those things where we've done something. There's still much more to be done in and around the Trade Union Act because there's certain areas that employees in this province still have a hard time, whether it's getting recognized in the trade union movement or as a charter, Mr. Speaker. I think more of the people that work part-time for the Department of Natural Resources. There's a group out there similar to what we have in the Department of Transportation, the part-time workers that work in equipment. And these people have worked for some time, and we've been trying to work with both the Minister of Natural Resources and the Minister responsible for the Public Service Commission to look at these employees and find a fitting place for them. Because if they're in any other industry, Mr. Speaker, they would be allowed to form a union, but because they work for Her Majesty, they're exempt from it. So, these are things we're working forward to, but I want to say at this time that I would thank the Minister, his deputy, and his staff over there for the hours that they put on moving this bill forward. It was certainly a very hard time from point to point, and they did go out and sought broad consultation, which I appreciated, and I think this bill is the result of it. It is a compromise bill, but in essence, it is a good bill. It is a bill that represents lots of hard work by many people in the bureaucracy that some from time to time get maligned by many people. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, after working on this bill, there is people that work over it at the Department of Environment and Labour are second to none, and they should be recognized for this. I may not have agreed with all their points of view, but their hard work and dedication to this province certainly came through in trying to move this bill forward. Thank you very much.
Motion is for third reading of Bill 140. Recognize all Minister of Environment and Labour.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a few things I'd like to say. I certainly appreciate the kind comments from the member opposite. We're certainly committed, the government's certainly committed to ensuring that there's fair and reasonable process in place to protect the rights of unions, employers, and employees. And, we devoted a lot of time to this with regards to the public consultation, and I think it certainly was beneficial and did pay off to get to this point. It began when the unions identified concerns about access to justice and unreasonable delays in the grievance arbitrations. And in response, the opposition tabled the Bill 219, which proposed some solutions, and the proposed solutions included an expedited arbitration process and a duty of fair representation complaint process. So the expedited arbitration is a system that's intended to address the grievances that are unreasonably delayed, and under the duty of fair representation, the unions would have the legal duty to represent their members in a manner that is not arbitrary, discriminatory, or in bad faith. So a new mechanism for filing complaints by union members would have been created based on the duty, and on this duty, and the Labour Relations Board would be mandated to review and determine these complaints. So the proposal therefore broadened the mandate of the Labour Relations Board to include complaints from union members who feel they have not been or not received fair representation. It's also important to note that the unions already have a duty to fairly represent their members, which can be enforced through litigation in the courts. Given that the Labor Relations Board jurisdiction in these matters will ensure a more speedy access to resolution of the disputes for both the unions and the employers. So in response to 219, the government committed to the consultation process that was mentioned and requested submissions from key stakeholders, and those submissions have been reviewed and clearly identify where there was agreement and where there was disagreement. So the submissions consistently included statements that good labor relations benefit workers, employers, government, and the province in general. However, there was no consensus that the proposed amendments in Bill 219 would be effective in improving labor relations. So in general, employers were opposed to both changes, although to a lesser extent the duty of fair representation, and argued that there is good labor relations in Nova Scotia workplaces currently, and in contrast, the unions unanimously supported the proposals. They argued that labor relations needed to be improved, and they believed that these two changes would do so by reducing costs, by minimizing delays in arbitration, and by giving easier redress to union members with complaints against their unions. There were also some common issues in the submissions. There was certainly some agreement that capacity is the key reason for arbitration delays, and this concerned the availability of qualified arbitrators, advocates, and representatives of both union and management. Stakeholders also agreed that capacity would not be addressed by the original provisions of Bill 219, and the common goal agreed on by everyone, government, union, employers, and employees, was fair access to justice for all. To make Bill 219 work, we clearly needed to address these concerns. We needed amendments that balance the rights of all stakeholders, and I'm happy to say the language in 219 has now been amended to provide a mechanism for dealing with arbitration cases that are unreasonably delayed. The problem of capacity can be addressed through further dialogue with stakeholders without the need for legislative changes, and the new model will not affect the situations where the parties have agreed to extend the grievance process in accordance with their collective agreements. It will also enable them to address delays that have gone beyond those bounds. So the new model essentially lengthens the time within which the parties maintain their autonomy, but at the same time creates a broader range of ministerial powers once the period of autonomy has lapsed. In other words, the model incorporates more of a case management approach for addressing unreasonable delays. Reflects the views that at some point in the process, the interest of the parties in maintaining control of their own process must be balanced against the general interest of the system in fair process that delivers timely outcomes. So the proposed legislation as amended attempts to balance the interests of the union, the employer, government, and the public. And we certainly appreciate, I guess, the comments from the members opposite, and I'm very pleased to have been able to say a few words, and thank you for your cooperation.
I recognize all member Cape Breton Centre. Be closed debate on Bill 219.
Question, Bill 219.
Question is for third reading of Bill 219. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 219, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Trade Union Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call private and local bills for third reading?
Private local bills for third reading.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 255, the Train Station in Cabooses Act?
Bill number 255. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Mr. Speaker, I move Bill number 255, third reading.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 255. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 255, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 14 of the Acts of 1995, the Train Station in Cabooses Act.
Order the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just one moment till I get my papers here. Would you please call would you please call private members' public bills for third reading?
Private members' bills for third reading.
Would you please call Bill number 270, the Professional Planners Act?
Bill number 270, the Honourable Member for Halifax, Shabakto.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I had occasion when this bill came forward at second reading to make some comments. Given that I'm on the record as having raised a number of difficulties with the bill at the time, I wish now to go on record at this opportunity at third reading to state that the matters that I had raised as concerns have been addressed, and so I'm quite prepared to support the bill. I had raised a few points about the nature of public representation on the board. I had raised questions about consultation with the department concerned. I had raised a question about whether this kind of bill, that is a bill which sets up a self-regulating profession, really should come forward at all as a private member's bill, or whether some other mechanism would be appropriate. I have to say I'm still of the opinion that when it comes to self-regulating professions, that these bills should not come forward as private members' bills. They really should come forward from the department concerned. We know that a number of organizations, particularly in the health field, are interested in having themselves established as self-regulating professions, and I would not like to see this this question come forward without the approval and, of course, screening of the department concerned. In this particular case, this bill did come forward as a private member's bill. It was well advanced, and it didn't seem appropriate to start all over again and ask them to bring the bill forward as a bill from the department. As it happens, the organization concerned met with me on a number of occasions, and I'm happy to say was extremely cooperative in working to address the points that I raised. And they did, in fact, go and speak with the department concerned and obtained their approval. In those circumstances, as I said, I have no difficulty in voting in favor of the bill as it now comes before us, amended for third reading. And unless it's been formally done, I'm happy to move third reading of this bill.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 270. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 270, entitled An Act Respecting Professional Planners.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now recess until the hour of 5:30 p.m. So move.
So recess till 5:30. Is it agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. So recess to 5:30. Just to remind the members of the meeting that's in Uniac Room now.